My brother asked me to co-sign on a loan so he could start over. He promised it was safe. Months later, I was sued for $40,000. When I called him, he laughed and said, "You're the idiot who trusted me. I needed out. You were convenient." I lost my car, my credit, almost my job. Then I found a copy of the loan contract with a signature that wasn't mine. See, I don't have great handwriting. My signature's sloppy, but it's consistent. There's a certain way I looped my D, a certain slant. And this forgery? It was a cheap copy. Slower. Like someone trying to mimic it after looking at an old document. That's when it hit me. He must have taken something I'd signed before. Maybe an old lease or a birthday card. Copied it. Faked it. I called the dealership first thing the next morning. Got some guy named Doug on the line. I told him I needed a copy of everything Nate had signed. He said I'd have to come in. So I drove the hour down to Florence, Kentucky in a rental my friend let me borrow for the day. The place looked worse than I remembered. A trailer office with a peeling sign that said, Midwest Auto and Equipment Finance. No real showroom. Just a few rusted-out vans and trucks in a gravel lot. Inside, the guy behind the desk, Doug, wore a stretched-out Bengals hoodie and didn't seem thrilled to see me. I asked for the loan files. He pulled out a beat-up accordion folder, started flipping. "Yup," he said, chewing on a pen. "Loan for 40, signed by both parties." "Let me see the amendment," I said. He handed me a copy. I pulled out my driver's license and pointed to my signature. "That's my real one. Now look at this." I held up the amendment. "I didn't sign that." Doug stared for a second, then shrugged. "Looks close enough. Maybe you forgot." "I didn't. That's fraud. That's a forged signature." Now he looked nervous. "Listen, man," he said. "We just file what they bring us. I don't check signatures with the FBI or anything. If it's signed, we assume it's good." I demanded to know who processed the amendment. He said it was dropped off 2 days after the original loan. In person. By Nate. I felt the rage boiling. That piece of garbage had forged my signature on a $40,000 loan amendment, and no one even called me. No phone verification. No email. Nothing. I asked for copies. Doug hesitated, but I reminded him I was listed on the loan, and legally entitled to the records. He gave me the full file. Back in my car, I called a lawyer. Or tried to. The first 2 I called didn't want to touch it unless I paid a consultation fee I couldn't afford. The third, some older guy named Milton out in Dayton, actually listened. When I told him about the forged signature and the financial damage I'd taken, he asked me to come in with the documents. I drove straight there. Milton was a tough, quiet guy. Wore suspenders. Didn't smile much. He looked over the files for 10 minutes, then leaned back and said, "Your brother committed felony fraud. And the dealership? They're sloppy. You might have a case." He explained I could press charges. Maybe sue. He said it wouldn't be quick, and it wouldn't be clean, but if we played it smart, we could nail Nate and possibly get me out from under the debt. But he warned me, it could blow up the family. I told him I didn't care. Family didn't mean anything when one of them put a knife in your back and smiled while twisting it. I didn't tell anyone I hired the lawyer. Not my parents. Not mutual friends. Nate had blocked me, and I wasn't about to go begging. We started gathering everything. Milton had a forensic handwriting expert analyze the documents. The report came back a few weeks later, 99.8% certainty the second signature wasn't mine. That was enough. We filed a police report. Gave them the evidence. Gave them the dealership files. They took statements. Slowly, the pieces started falling into place. But that wasn't enough for me. See, part of me still wanted to confront him. To look him in the face. To see if he'd lie again, or admit it. And one night I got my chance. A mutual friend, Jason, texted me out of nowhere. "Yo, saw Nate at Silverbacks last night. He was drunk, bragging about some settlement money or something. Drove off in a black Silverado. Said he was moving to Florida soon." That was it. I drove down to Silverbacks, the grimy bar off Route 68 where Nate used to blow his paycheck every Friday, and sure enough, the black Silverado was parked outside. I waited. About an hour later, he came stumbling out, grinning like he owned the world. I stepped out of my car and walked straight up to him. "Hey, Nate." He froze. His smirk dropped. "What do you want?" I held up a manila folder and tapped it against my hand. "You remember that loan amendment you forged?" He shrugged. "Prove it." I did. I opened the folder. Showed him the handwriting analysis. The police report. The name of the detective. His eyes scanned the paper. I could tell he was trying to figure out how serious it was. "You're full of crap," he said, though his voice cracked. "Maybe," I said. "But you'll find out real soon." I leaned in close. "You didn't just ruin my credit, Nate. You screwed with the wrong person." Then I walked away. But this wasn't over. It was just starting. I didn't hear anything for a week after that confrontation outside the bar. Then, Detective Allen from the Boone County Sheriff's Office called. He said they'd been in contact with Nate. Told me my brother had come in for a conversation, with his lawyer present. "He's denying everything," the detective said. "Claims you're setting him up because you're jealous of his success." I laughed. "What success? He's driving around in a stolen lifestyle." Detective Allen didn't laugh. "We'll investigate further. But don't expect this to be quick." 2 days later, I got an envelope in the mail from Nate's lawyer, a cease and desist. He accused me of defamation and harassment. Said if I contacted Nate again, they'd sue me. So that's how he wanted to play it. I sent the letter to Milton. He chuckled when he read it. "Classic misdirection. They're scared. Keep the pressure on." We filed a formal complaint with the Kentucky Attorney General's office. I also contacted the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And then Milton sent a demand letter to the dealership itself, accusing them of gross negligence for accepting a forged signature without proper verification. We gave them a deadline: settle with me and drop the debt, or we sue. Now things started moving. The dealership lawyer called Milton directly. Claimed they had no knowledge of any forgery, but said they were willing to discuss resolution. That told us one thing. They didn't want this going public. Around that same time, I lost my job. I showed up late twice that month because the bus route changed without notice. HR brought me in and said they had to let me go. Performance issues, they called it. I was devastated. Losing my job meant no steady income, no way to keep paying Milton, and no buffer to protect me if this dragged out longer. I told Milton I might have to pause the case. He didn't even blink. "We're in this now. Don't stop. I'll defer fees for now." I didn't expect that. Not from a lawyer. But maybe he'd seen something in my case, or maybe he just hated seeing people like Nate get away with this kind of crap. Then, the big twist came. A woman named Michelle messaged me on Facebook. She said, "Hi, I know you don't know me, but I used to date Nate. He scammed me too. He said you were his rich brother who was helping him launch a family business. He used that to convince me to let him use my credit card for a business investment. He racked up $6,000 and disappeared." She sent screenshots, texts, photos, even a selfie of Nate in front of the same truck he bought using the forged loan. I asked her to talk to Milton. She agreed. Then another person came forward. A guy named Eric who met Nate at a bar and said Nate offered to flip cars if he invested cash. He never saw that money again either. It became clear Nate had been running small scams everywhere. And now, all those burned people started connecting the dots. Milton started building a bigger case: pattern of behavior, intent to defraud, possible criminal conspiracy. He reached out to the county prosecutor. Suddenly, it wasn't just a civil case anymore. It was criminal. And Nate? He finally realized the walls were closing in. That's when he sent me a text. First contact in weeks. "Let's talk. No lawyers. Just us." I stared at it. Milton told me not to respond. He's fishing. He's panicking. But I did. "You want to talk? Meet me at Mom and Dad's. Sunday. Noon. You bring the truck title, the dealership papers, and a signed confession. Or don't bother showing up." No reply. Sunday came. I drove over to my parents' house, parked outside. I didn't even go in. Just waited on the front porch. At 12:06, a black Silverado pulled up. Nate stepped out. He looked thinner. Greasy. Pale. Not the smug jerk I'd seen outside Silverback's. He walked up, holding a folder. "You want a confession?" he muttered. I didn't say anything. He handed it over. Inside was a handwritten letter. He admitted he forged the amendment, lied about the loan, and manipulated me. "I'll sign it in front of a notary," he said. Just make it stop." I nodded. Took the folder. "Why now?" I asked. He looked away. "Because I've got nothing left. They froze my accounts. They're gonna charge me. I didn't think you'd go this far." I stepped closer. "You stole from me. You almost cost me everything. You laughed when I called for help. You spit on me when I trusted you." He didn't respond. "You're not sorry." You're just scared. He turned, got back in the truck, and drove off. I looked down at the folder. This wasn't the end. This was the last nail before the hammer fell. The confession changed everything. Milton had it notarized the next morning and filed it with the court. It was short, just 3 paragraphs in Nate's messy handwriting, but it admitted to the forgery, the inflated loan, and even mentioned that the dealership never verified anything. It was all we needed. Or so we thought. The dealership's legal team responded fast. Too fast. Within 2 days, they claimed the confession was coerced and inadmissible. They accused me of threatening Nate to get it signed. Then, the next morning, I got an email from Milton. We have a problem. Call me ASAP. I called. He didn't even say hello. They filed a countersuit. What? The dealership. They're suing you. Claiming defamation, malicious interference, and trying to make you the fall guy for the whole thing. Says you and Nate colluded to defraud them, then you turned on him. I just stood there in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, heart pounding. This is insane, I said. They're really trying to pin it on me now? Milton sounded calm, but I knew him well enough by now to recognize when his jaw was tight. They're bluffing. It's a pressure tactic. They know we're close to blowing the doors off their shady operation. But we'll need more. That confession isn't enough anymore. We went back to Michelle, the ex-girlfriend Nate had scammed, and asked if she'd testify. She said yes. She even found a photo of Nate with a clipboard full of dealership paperwork, bragging in a text. Big score today. Dealer didn't even check IDs, lol. We also tracked down the notary public who originally signed off on the first loan. Her name was Carla, and she remembered Nate clearly. Yeah, she said, flipping through her old records. That boy seemed sketchy. Tried to rush me through the signing. Did you notarize the amendment? She looked confused. What amendment? That was it. She testified that she never notarized the $40,000 loan amendment, and that she hadn't even been at the dealership the day it was supposedly signed. Now we had a notarization fraud issue on top of forgery. That made the dealership look even worse. Meanwhile, Nate was spiraling. I heard from Jason that he'd gotten kicked out of the apartment he was staying at and was living out of that Silverado, which, surprise, wasn't fully paid off either. He'd defaulted on the payments. I don't know what pushed him over the edge, but one night, he showed up at my apartment. I was watching TV when I heard pounding on the door. I looked through the peephole. There he was. Wild-eyed. Sweating. Talking to himself. I opened the door halfway, but left the chain on. What are you doing here, Nate? He looked like a cornered animal. You ruined my life, man. He spat. I laughed. I ruined your life? You dragged this out. You could have just paid it off. You didn't have to make it a whole thing. He was shouting now, hands flying everywhere. Give me the confession back. I changed my mind. I take it back. It doesn't work like that, Nate. He slammed his palm on the door. You don't get it. You can't get it. You always had it easy. You were the favorite. You had the job, the credit, the friends. You never had to hustle. You call what you do hustling? I snapped. You're a parasite. You lied to everyone who ever tried to help you. He looked like he might cry. Then he mumbled. You were supposed to be my brother. I was, I said. Until you sold me out. I closed the door. He didn't leave right away. I heard him pacing the hallway, muttering, kicking the wall. But eventually he left. 2 days later, the Silverado was repossessed from the parking lot of a Motel 6 on the edge of town. I knew because the tow driver posted a photo of it on Facebook. Someone in the community group tagged me. And that's when another twist dropped. A woman named Carla, not the notary, different Carla, reached out to me via email. She said she used to work at Midwest Auto and Equipment Finance. Claimed she quit last year after the owner, Doug, the guy I met that day, asked her to fudge some paperwork to push through a big loan. Her message read, he's been doing this for years. Changing signatures, backdating forms, even making up extra fees on contracts. I was told to look the other way or find another job. I walked out. I'll testify if you need me. We needed her. We needed all of them. The dealership had just gone from a sleazy business to a potentially criminal enterprise. Milton was thrilled. This is how we flipped the script, he said. This isn't just about your brother anymore. This is bigger. I asked what came next. He said, we sue the dealership for damages, pursue criminal charges, and put pressure on the AG's office to investigate everyone involved. If we do this right, we bury them. And Nate? He'd just become the least of their problems. 6 months later, I stood in a courtroom in Boone County and watched everything come full circle. The judge had just read the final ruling out loud. I won the lawsuit. Not just against Nate, but against Midwest Auto and Equipment Finance. The court found them liable for fraud, negligence, and conspiracy to commit financial harm. The damages awarded to me totaled $147,000. That included the original $40,000 debt, emotional distress, job loss damages, and attorney fees. But it wasn't just about money. It was about finally being seen, being heard after months of people telling me, "That's just how family is," or, "You should have known better." Turns out, the dealership had a long history of pulling shady deals like this. Carla, the former employee, wasn't the only one. 2 other ex-workers came forward after her testimony hit local news. One said Doug kept a stash of blank signed contracts in a drawer. Another said he once saw Doug fix an application by photocopying a signature from another customer. And the notary? She sued them separately for using her stamp on forged paperwork. Doug and the dealership's lawyer tried to settle, but by then, the state was involved. The Kentucky Attorney General's office launched a full investigation. The dealership was shut down within a month of the ruling. The building was padlocked and marked for auction. Doug was arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud and forgery. But the part that hit me hardest? Nate. When the court ruled against him, he didn't show. His public defender stood in for him. I later learned he was already in jail in another county for trying to pawn a fake title on a truck he didn't own. The Silverado had been repossessed, and he tried forging a bill of sale to claim it was his again. It backfired. Bad. He got 18 months for fraud and violation of probation. My parents didn't take it well. They begged me not to testify against him. Even tried to guilt-trip me after the verdict. My mom said, "He's still your brother." I told her, "I don't have a brother anymore." We didn't speak for a long time after that. At first, I felt guilty. Like maybe I'd gone too far. But then I remembered what Nate said to me on the phone when this all started. "You were convenient." He didn't make a mistake. He made a choice. He used me. And when I was no longer useful, he laughed and walked away. Now, he was the one stuck behind bars. And not just any jail, he ended up in the same county where he scammed 2 other people who were now pushing for charges. That meant he'd be in court again soon. More time. More consequences. Meanwhile, I started rebuilding. I took the settlement money and paid off the debts that wrecked my credit. I finally bought a used Subaru. Nothing flashy, just reliable. I got a new job at a different logistics firm, smaller company, better culture. When I explained the gap in my work history, the owner shook my hand and said, "Sounds like you've been through hell. Welcome aboard." But I didn't just stop there. I started sharing my story. First on Facebook, then on Reddit. Then local news picked it up. They ran a full segment on financial scams and family betrayal. People reached out from across the state. Some had been burned by family. Some by car dealerships just like mine. One guy, a veteran, said, "Reading what happened to you made me finally stand up to my son-in-law who forged my name on a payday loan." It spread farther than I expected. Nate saw it too. Or so I heard. A friend said he was furious that I made him look like a criminal. He didn't get it. He was a criminal. And now everyone knew it. Eventually, I heard he was trying to make some kind of fresh start once he got out. I didn't care. I told Milton we'd keep the civil judgment active. If Nate ever tried to buy a house, get a loan, or even register a vehicle, my lien would be waiting. I wouldn't need to lift a finger. As for me, I learned a hard truth. Trust is a gift. And family? It doesn't mean much when someone uses it as a weapon. I'm not the same man I was before this all started. I'm colder now. Wiser. I don't hand out help just because someone shares my blood. I read every document, every contract, every fine print. Twice. But I sleep better at night. And when I drive past that old dealership lot and see it overgrown with weeds, locked behind rusted gates, I smile a little. Because justice didn't come easy. But it came. And when it did, it burned.